You're listening to the Kelly Green Hour for the Always Next Year Podcast Studio Network. You can find the team on our Twitter at ANY Podcast or visit us on our website, www.alwaysnextyearpodcast.com. And now, to bring us in, the Jackdaws.
A fighting man I used to be, revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such eagle my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still have me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Kelly Green Hour here on the Always Next Year podcast. Again, thank you to the Jackdaws for bringing us into this segment. I'm your host, LJ Harrell, and joining me today, as always, is Connor, as we are set to discuss the Philadelphia Eagles Week 2 matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. Connor, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, and how about yourself?
It's Friday, man. And better than that, it's a football Friday. We are 2 days away. I hate Sunday night games, by the way, because I hate waiting all day. I'd much rather get it out of the way. Let's play 1 o'clock. I just want Eagles football on my TV right away. But I mean, we gotta wait. We gotta wait for Sunday night, and it's going to be a long day waiting for the game to start.
Oh, I agree. I hate waiting for it, but on the bright side, because I love fantasy football, there's just so much to watch on a Sunday. So I can definitely the wait is far more tolerable for me.
That's true. I mean, I can check my fantasy teams, I guess, here and there, and just sit there. And as we approach that 8:20 on the East Coast, which would be what, 9:20 your time.
Yep.
Wow. Now that's gotta kind of stink. So you have to stay up extra later than us. That must stink having to go to work on a Monday morning.
We don't play many of those late games, so it's not so bad.
Okay.
But I mean, I had a buddy who.
Oh yeah, that's true. You only care about the Eagles.
He's a big Raiders fan, and he stayed up that 11:30 night, and man, he was like a zombie the next day.
Oh yeah, they played
like
the late
3
game.
a.m. Yeah.
Oh, that had to be rough for him. That had to be really rough. All right, so the Eagles are in Atlanta this week. It's the Atlanta Falcons home opener. Let's quickly go over Atlanta's Week 1. They lost 28-12 to the Minnesota Vikings. Kirk Cousins only threw the ball 10 times. The Vikings used the running game. They ran the ball, and they ran the ball for 172 yards and only passed it for 97. Now, they didn't have a lot of yards, and most of the offensive stats, minus a third down efficiency, were in favor of the Falcons, which could have been late game kind of garbage time numbers, but the Falcons pretty much were dominated in that game by Minnesota. What are your thoughts on that game and what, the Eagles could possibly take away from that heading into this Week 2 matchup?
Well, I mean, I guess the big thing for the Vikings, they were set up for success. All the picks and the special teams, there was a blocked punt there that set them up early. They picked off Matt Ryan 2 times. Sacked him 4 times for 32 yards, so they were constantly backing him up. So it definitely, they definitely had a lot of help in that. That is what led to the not really having the need for going after a ton of yardage, because I mean, when you're sacking a guy for 32 yards, picking him off twice and have a blocked punt, I mean, you definitely set yourself up to not really have to do a whole lot of work on the field. But I mean, some takeaways I had: the Falcons' offensive line looked brutal. They gave up pressure after pressure and gave Matt Ryan no time to get comfortable or create any flow in the game. And I know that the offensive line's a little beat up. There's a couple injuries there, including Lindstrom, the guy that they drafted.
He's a starter too.
Exactly. So that did not help the situation. I mean, and then they were unable to open up space for Freeman either, because Freeman had a brutal game. He was 8 carries for 19 yards. He could not get his longest rush of 5 yards. He could not get anything going. And I think a lot of that is attributed to the offensive line, which I would like to say is something we should get excited for as Eagles fans. But at the same time, maybe not so, because we couldn't even take on the Redskins offensive line last week.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, everybody this week has been talking about, on the airways here in Philly, that the Eagles should be able to manhandle that offensive front for the Falcons. But you mentioned it. We were supposed to do the same thing to the Redskins, and the Redskins, we had one sack, and that was Tim Jernigan late in the game. The ends weren't able to get pressure, and we talked about it when we did the victory green hour this week after the win against the Redskins. I mentioned how they missed the boat on getting an end like Jadeveon Clowney, somebody that can be disruptive off the end. Brandon Graham isn't really a pass rusher. He's more of a run stuffer who goes after the quarterback. Derek Barnett seems to always be injured, and he's finally healthy, so we'll see if his shoulder is good to go. Behind him, Vinny Curry didn't do much, didn't really play much. Josh Sweat wasn't even active. The other Deshaun Hall wasn't active, so it's going to be interesting to see if these defensive ends can get after it, because if not, Howie Roseman's going to have to find a way to make a move to improve that front four, because we know Schwartz does not like to blitz. And in order to help out the secondary, you have to get pressure on the quarterback. And the front four has to find a way to get pressure on the quarterback. And it doesn't help that Malik Jackson's hurt, even though Tim Jernigan is a suitable replacement for him. But when you're missing, you have that injured star up front, that was supposed to play big next to Fletcher Cox, they're going to have to find a way to get pressure without blitzing, because we've seen it time and time again. Jim Schwartz isn't going to blitz unless he's forced to. And if he's forced to against this Atlanta Falcons offense, they're going to be able to make plays down the field with that receiving core that they have.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there was actually a stat that I looked up. The Eagles were second only to the Jets in receptions per game to the slot. And so, I mean, that spells like as soon as you start bringing pressure, that would spell a massive game for Austin Hooper and Mohamed Sanu, because they feast in the slot. Obviously, one's a tight end, and Sanu is a slot specialist, basically, for the Falcons now with Ridley and Jones. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what they can do, like you said, to see what they can accomplish against this line. I know this offensive line is they're a lot smaller. They're smaller and they're kind of fast. So they kind of, things have to start to happen really quick for Matt Ryan and Devontae Freeman, or else it ends up like the Vikings game where the pressure is constantly on them and they can get no rhythm going on offense. So it should be really interesting what they can do with that. But I mean, the Vikings were expected to be a really good defense, and it actually showed up. I mean, you watch highlights, or if you watched any parts of the game, they were constantly in Matt Ryan's face, constantly putting pressure. Their secondary was playing extremely well, keeping the pressure on Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones. I mean, Jones only had 6 receptions for 31 yards. The biggest threat was Austin Hooper with 77 yards on 9 catches. So, I mean, they had pressure all game, and it didn't look like it stopped. Matt Ryan had someone in his face all the time. So, I mean, the QB hits, they had 7 QB hits, which is astronomical against the Falcons and Matt Ryan, who's traditionally a bit better at getting the ball out. So I would like to see them definitely put in some work, even if you come with even maybe one linebacker, try and create a little bit of more pressure. Maybe that'll be just enough if the defensive line can't get things going.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. The Eagles should have an advantage on the front, going up against the Atlanta offensive line, even their defensive line. They're not that big, but let's stick with the offense. We know the names. We know Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Mohamed Sanu, Austin Hooper. Devontae Freeman. They have a lot of firepower on the offensive side of the ball. But is it just me, or do the Falcons not seem the same ever since they blew that Super Bowl against the Patriots 3 years ago? Ever since Super Bowl 51, they were up 28-3, and the Patriots made that comeback. Yeah, they made the playoffs the next year, losing to the Eagles in Philly, but they have not been the same team. And they changed coordinators. Dan Quinn's now calling the defense. I think Dirk Cutter's back there calling the offense, if I'm not mistaken. It's just interesting because they have a Hall of Fame talent in a quarterback at quarterback in Matt Ryan, a Hall of Fame receiver in Julio Jones, and yet they can't score. They struggle on offense. It amazes me that when we watch the Atlanta Falcons that they just struggle so much with the type of talent they have on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, they feel like that team that's just stuck in mediocrity and they just can't break out of it. They remind me of here's a Philadelphia one here, the Flyers. Just a team that's stuck in mediocrity and just is struggling to get out of it. They just can't seem to get that next step, that final step towards a championship. I mean, they get close every time they're in the run-ins right up until the end to get into the playoffs, and they just can't seem to pull it together long enough in the playoffs and at the end of the season to really make things happen. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to say take it back to that game necessarily, but I mean, it's definitely, I don't know if it's Dan Quinn or what has to change there, but it clearly isn't the weapons. Because I mean, you look at, like, you name the weapons. I mean, that you should be able to do things with that team. And I mean, I'm in a similar boat with Ron Rivera in Carolina. Like, you should be able to do things with those weapons. So the fact that it comes back to this is that I feel it's almost a coaching thing, more or less than rather the team thing.
Yeah, definitely. And, we look at the offensive weapons. In the last 3 games against the Eagles, Julio Jones has averaged 10 catches for 135 yards. But the big stat is he has 0 touchdowns against the Eagles. That should be nearly impossible, the way he has been able to dominate. And we've seen that he's had a chance in the NFC divisional playoff game and in the week 1 last year, where he's had a chance to come down with balls in the end zone to take the lead and win games against the Eagles, and he hasn't been able to. Now, they haven't been great play calls because you cut off half the field on those plays, but it's just amazing that he can put up these type of numbers and just not find his way into the end zone.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I mean, I was reading up a little bit prior to the show, and it was kind of spoke to how the Eagles may let them march down the field, but they seem to turn it up against the Falcons in the red zone, and they just can never get anything done.
Yeah, they have that bend but don't break mentality on defense against the Falcons.
Exactly. You give them those 10 yards, and then when there's no 10 yards to give for the cornerback, suddenly the pressure's on. And it just seems like the Falcons can never get anything done when the pressure's on. And I mean, I guess it showed last week in the Falcons and Vikings game that when the pressure's on Matt Ryan, he's not necessarily able to make the right plays or make the play that he wants to make.
Yeah, it's frustrating, I guess, as a Falcon fan when they have all that talent and they're not able to move the ball. Another stat that I found interesting, the last 3 games between the Eagles and Falcons have all been in Philly. But, the Falcons have only averaged 12 points a game. That offense, granted, the Eagles defense is different. Especially in 2017, when they were at home, they weren't giving up anything. But again, like the amount, I say it over and over again, the amount of talent that they have, they could, again, in between the 20s, up until you hit the red zone, they move the ball at will. But then you get into that red zone, and you mentioned it, the field shrinks, and the Eagles defense is able to put hands or put pressure in the face of Matt Ryan, and they're just not able to execute. Obviously, as an Eagles fan, we're happy about that. But, again, as a Falcons fan, all the weapons that they have, Matt Ryan has not played well against the Eagles, his hometown team. He went to Westchester East, I think, if I'm not mistaken, before going to Boston College. That's literally a half an hour, 45 minutes away from where I'm sitting right now. This is his hometown team. He never plays well against the Eagles. And usually, when you're going up against your hometown team, that's when you want to show out. That's when you want to put your best foot forward, and he's just not able to.
Absolutely. It seems that way, and maybe it's just the way the direction of Matt Ryan's career is going, because it seems to be a struggle against a lot of teams now, and he's not able to use the weapons like he used to be able to use the weapons. I mean, Julio Jones just got a massive extension, so I mean, you damn well better put that guy to use, and especially in the red zone. That's where Julio Jones should be a specialist. He goes up and he can get almost any ball you put up there. You just got to put it in just the right spot for him, and he'll bring it down for you. But it just feels like Matt Ryan can't do that. And I mean, I guess for me, Devontae Freeman is one that I'm interested to see this week, because last week was his first game back after a torn ACL. So obviously we know building that confidence back. Be interesting to see if he becomes a threat against the Eagles, unlike what he was against the Vikings.
Yeah, and Ito Smith is now their backup running back because Tevin Coleman went to San Francisco. So, I actually picked up Ito Smith in fantasy. I think it was last year or 2 years ago, whenever Devontae was hurt for a majority of the season. He actually put some numbers up for me. But, again, he was their leading. Ito Smith was the leading rusher last week for the Falcons. He had only 31 yards, but he was still the leading rusher. Freeman not able to do anything. We mentioned how the Redskins weren't able to run against the Eagles defense, but Keenum threw for 380 yards. Now, we saw what Terry McLaurin, as you mentioned, in the Victory Green Hour earlier this week, but that he's in the 95th percentile in his speed. Are we worried though? Calvin Ridley's got speed. Julio Jones is big, but his strides allow him to go fast. So he has deceptive speed. Mohamed Sanu is good in the slot because he could do body. He has that body positioning. He can go up against receivers. Should we be worried about the Eagles secondary against this very talented group of receivers?
Absolutely. I mean, I had that as my X factor, the position to watch is the wide receivers versus the cornerbacks, because we know the way that our cornerbacks play, and Matt Ryan will feast on that. Like we were just talking about earlier, when under pressure, that's when he doesn't make the right decisions. He doesn't get the playoff that he wants to get off. So if you give him 10 yards every time, he'll just run you a slant or run you a hook, and he'll connect on those plays quick. He'll make that quick 2-3 second decision, and he'll take those chunks of 8-9 yards at a time and get down the field. Or if the pressure does come onto them and our secondary cannot handle the pressure, well, then he'll go long. I mean, I think a big person to watch is also Austin Hooper for this game, because he's an athletic freak for a tight end. So, I mean, we don't necessarily have the best. We have good safeties, but we don't necessarily have the best linebackers as far as covering the tight ends. And the safeties are obviously going to be busy watching the likes of Ridley and Jones and helping the corners with that more than inside with Austin Hooper. So that was my big X factor concern was this receiving core.
Yeah, and last week in the Washington game, the Eagles played they played 3 linebackers for I think 2 snaps the entire game. They played 2 linebackers about 50% of the time. That's how much Zach Brown was on the field. Nigel Bradham played every snap. When they want to go to maybe a 2 linebacker set, they just bring Malcolm Jenkins down. We saw a lot of Andrew Sendejo in the field. It's going to be him against Austin Hooper probably, and that's a matchup that probably favors the Falcons, especially if Sendejo plays like he played last week. I would like to see Jonathan Cyprien out there. That's just my preference, because I don't think Sendejo has it anymore. But it's going to be key that it's probably not going to be Nigel Bradham, but one of these, whatever linebacker's going up against a tight end like Austin Hooper, who has the talent to make plays down the field. We saw what Vernon Davis did against the Eagles in the first quarter on that long touchdown reception of 48 yards. It's going to be very important for the Eagles defense to tackle, keep balls in front of them, keep the receivers in front of them, and don't let anybody get behind you, because if these receivers get behind you, they will make you pay.
Oh, absolutely. And we even saw it just in the Redskins game, who we barely even know the receivers, and they got behind them and they made them look silly. So imagine what actual receivers who have experience can do against us if they get behind us.
Yeah, very true. And then you mentioned, I think the big key is the Chris Lindstrom injury for the Falcons. He was the starting, I think, right guard, which is the person that will line up, I think, against Fletcher Cox. That backup, if Fletcher Cox cannot dominate this matchup, then we might have issues. I know that they're going to probably double team him, which means Tim Jernigan should have a field day. Somebody's going to have a field day on the front four. We mentioned it earlier. They have to put pressure in the face of Matt Ryan. You put pressure in his face, he will just float the ball up because he trusts his receivers. Obviously, when you have a Julio Jones type, I would just throw it up to him. He can out jump, 90% of the D-backs in the NFL. So why the heck not do it? But if you do that, you have a chance to get some picks. The Eagles didn't get any turnovers last week. It's going to be important for them to find ways to get turnovers, because this is the home opener for Atlanta. And Atlanta, let's be real, they hate the Eagles. The Eagles have dominated them, beat them the last 3 times. Granted, all those games were in Philly, but they were in big spots. Week 1, of last year when you want to set the tone. In the NFC divisional playoff game, when you're trying to get to the NFC Championship game, and Atlanta came in as the first 6 seed to be favored over a number 1 seed. They at this point in time hate the Eagles. I think I can say, and this is a key game for them. A, they don't want to go 0-2 in the division with the Saints in the division, and B, they just want to prove that they can beat the Eagles. I mean, it pretty much comes down to that.
Oh, absolutely. We always love to beat the Falcons. They're just one of those teams that you just want to beat. You just love to beat, and I don't even know why. They're kind of like the Falcons, the Vikings, the Saints.
The Vikings only because their fans are petty.
That's true.
After that NFC Championship game, like that.
Exactly.
Like when the Eagles go to Minnesota in a month or two, like that's going to be fun, especially if the Eagles can come away. They won the Super Bowl in Minnesota, like after that NFC Championship game. Like I think that's why Eagle fans that we don't like the Minnesota Vikings.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, so let's move over to the defensive side of the ball for the Atlanta Falcons. They are a talented defense, but they are small. Vic Beasley, Deion Jones, Tack McKinley, he's one of their DNs. Again, Dan Quinn is calling this defense. They have Keanu Neal. If you remember, the big play in that NFC divisional playoff game was Foles throwing the ball up and the ball bouncing off of Keanu Neal's knee right into the hands of Torrey Smith, who just retired, and then him getting the Eagles in field goal range before the half to put points on the board, and that gave them momentum going into halftime. Yes, this is a very fast, a very talented defensive team, but they are small, and that's the reason why Minnesota ran the ball all over them. It'd be interesting to see, will the Eagles use their big, fast, their big athletic offensive line and, just go ride them down the field with Jordan Howard, with Miles Sanders, and then go play action and use, Deshaun Jackson's speed, use Alshon Jeffrey's physical ability and put points up like that.
Yeah, this was my X factor for the Eagles, was like the run game. Can we get the run game going? Because like when you notice, like last week, I got a couple stats here. So they gave up 2.3 yards before contact. That's before even an initial contact was made, and then 3.1 yards after contact. So they were giving up about 5.4 yards a carry, and like it was all along the outside. The Falcons are big and strong inside, and they can be faster on the outside. But I mean, they struggle with Cook and Madison when they went to the outside and they created their own yardage away from the line. So I think this is a big game for Sproles and Sanders and maybe even Corey Clement. But I mean, Howard's one of those guys who's like a pounded Adam type of guy, and I don't think that's the run game you want to go with against the Falcons because they're big in there, they're strong inside on the tackles. But if you can get to the outside, I think that's where we really have a good chance of taking advantage, because that's what the Falcons did.
That's what the
Vikings did. Yeah.
I trust our offensive line going up against their defensive front. If they want to run Jordan Howard up the middle, because we know how good he is with yards after contact. He doesn't usually go down after the first hit. And we saw a couple runs like that last week. He averaged 7 yards a carry because he was able to move the piles. So you're right. I mean, they're probably going to want to go to the outside, but again, it's going to be key. Will the Falcons leave 2 safeties back or leave a safety back wherever Deshaun's at? Because we saw it last week. Deshaun ran by everybody. It didn't matter who was back there. He was running by everybody. Now, I mentioned it before. Deshaun had a big week 1, but it wouldn't surprise me if he had 2 or 3 catches for 15, 25 yards this week, just because A, the game plan might not call for him to go deep, and B, defenses are going to have to focus in on him, which is going to open everything else up for Alshon Jeffrey, Nelson Aguilar, Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, the running backs out the backfield. It's definitely going to be fun, or it's definitely going to be interesting to see the type of game plan Doug Peterson has against this Falcons offense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or defense,
Deshaun Jackson, he's a boomer bust guy, but it's just like any guy who's like a speed guy, like a Terry McLaurin. You're not going to see that every week. You're not going to see that with Deshaun Jackson either. That's just how they are. And I mean, maybe that's just fantasy me talking, but it's the same in any game. Those situations are going to come up. But yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see how he plans for it, because I mean, it seems a lot like he loves to push the pile with his running backs. And so I mean, after watching what the Vikings did by taking it to the outside and taking it to those guys along the outside, the safeties and the linebackers, and making the Falcons kind of chase, it'll be interesting to see if Peterson goes with a similar mentality and tries to take the game more to the outside. And I mean, the Falcons secondary wasn't even tested that much. I mean, like we said, they were only thrown to 10 times, so we don't have a whole lot to go off of as far as what the secondary is going to look like this year or what they can do. So this will be their first true test because we know Carson Wentz is throwing a hell of a lot more than 10 times.
Oh yeah, especially with Doug Peterson calling plays. The one thing I kind of disagree with you when it comes to Deshaun. When he was first here, he was a one-trick pony. He was, I'm running down the field, running a fly pattern, get me the ball. He runs the entire route tree now. When corners are playing 10, 12 yards off of him, he'll run a hitch, he'll run a comeback, he'll run an out post or a post pattern or an out pattern. That's why I like this new and improved Deshaun Jackson. Yeah, he's 32, and usually when you're getting up there in age, your speed goes away. He uses that to his advantage. He doesn't always have to run the 9 pattern, the fly pattern down the field. He can run every route, and that helps this offense. Because if you're going to have a safety over him and you're going to have a corner playing 10 yards off, give me a hitch. That's what receivers pretty much do against our secondary when they're playing 10 yards off. Deshaun can do that, and then when they have to respect that, then you can go downfield. But it also opens up the middle of the field for the other guys. It opens up the run game. And that's exactly what I think we have a chance to seeing on Sunday night.
Yeah, I mean, Doug Peterson, his playbook is massive. He clearly brings a different strategy or even a couple different strategies to every game. And I mean, it shows in the way that he uses the offense, and like just looking at the way the first half offense was, which was in preseason mode, and then the second half offense against the Redskins, that's just shows that like if Doug Pearson wants to slow it down and try and beat it down your throat, he can do that. If he wants to go the other direction and go long ball and open up the field and make you have to put 2 safeties out there and respect that we got some guys who can go catch the long ball, he can do that too. And that's why it's very interesting to see what he brings to this Falcons game, because he saw what the Vikings did. Not much passing, didn't really test the secondary, ran the ball, took it to the outside. So it'll be interesting to see if he tries to do a similar strategy to the Vikings, or obviously we know he's going to throw a lot more. So what type of strategy will he bring when attacking the secondary?
Yeah, and it's interesting because you mentioned how his playbook is massive. Josh McCown, who's been in the league for 18 years, who's seen every offense there is, he said when he first got here, he was like, I've never seen anything like this. Like, this is an offense he's never seen before with the number of variation of plays and everything that Doug has drawn up. So like is I think good to an extent. Hopefully it's not too much. Like, he has so much on his plate, he has so much that he could call that he may overthink himself. But to your point, they had on their the fourth quarter touchdown drive, I think it was, or third quarter, the Eagles had a 19-play drive to score that touchdown. So again, to your point, they don't have to go for the long 50-yard touchdown. They can grind it out, take time off the clock, and melt the game away to secure a victory. And when they needed to do it last week, they did it. And that helped, them take the 2-score lead and forcing, Washington to kind of just not sit on it, but to just throw the ball as much as they had to in that second half, even after a 17-0 lead.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so great. Like when we talk about coaches and what they bring to their team, Doug Peterson brings so many different elements to this team that makes it who they are. And that year that we won the Super Bowl, just the way that he was able to bring the playbook, he basically had a Carson Wentz playbook and he had a Nick Foles playbook. And the fact that he has that strategy, which makes me think that if anything were to ever happen to Wentz, he has a playbook there like, this is your playbook, Josh McCown. This is what we're going to do. And I wouldn't be surprised if he had that type of playbook just in case, because he's always thinking, it seems like he's always that next step ahead. Like, I mean, you can sit there, like, I'll throw a slight here at Rams fans and Sean McVay for a minute. You can sit there and you can talk about, oh my God, listen to Sean McVay talk. He's got so much knowledge of the game and all this stuff. But I mean, I don't need to hear Doug Peterson talk. You can see it in the way that he coaches. You can see it in the way that the game is played, who he is as a coach and how he is as a coach and all the different things that he brings to this Eagles team. And that's why Doug Peterson is better than Sean McVay.
Oh, yeah. And, he's the one that's talking into the quarterback's helmet. Doug Peterson coaches the quarterback, and he allows the quarterback to use their abilities to make plays. Sean McVay is in the ear of Jared Goff saying, this is what the safety's going to do. This is where you need to throw it. This is what's going to happen on this play. That's why in the Super Bowl last year, Belichick just waited until the microphones in the helmet went off and then changed his defense up. The Rams were stifled because Jared Goff really can't read defenses that well, unlike Carson Wentz. And so to your point in terms of the two totally different playbooks, it felt like Doug Peterson was using the Nick Foles playbook in the first half last week. Then he got to the Carson Wentz playbook in the second half, and the Eagles offense opened up. And that's exactly, again, you mentioned, let the Bronco buck. That's exactly what Carson Wentz did because Doug Peterson opened up the offense.
Absolutely, and I cannot wait for this weekend. I think it's actually going to be a really good game, and it's probably going to be a shootout. I don't think it's going to be a defensive war. I mean, I think we'll get pressure on Matt Ryan, but based on the issues we have in our secondary, I think Matt Ryan will be able to work this a lot better than the Vikings game, and he'll be able to take a bit more advantage of the secondary. Unless the pressure is that stifling, then the secondary isn't even something we have to concern ourselves with. But kind of like their secondary and the fact that we didn't see much of their secondary, we didn't really see a whole lot out of our defensive line. So my confidence in them being able to stifle them with pressure isn't exactly there right now.
All right, so let's move to the players to watch in this game. Give me one Eagles player that is going to be key. Don't go Carson Wentz because he's always key. And give me one Falcons player that's going to be key in this game for them and for the Eagles to look out for. And then I'll do the same.
For the Eagles, I'm going to go Miles Sanders because I think this is a game that you can really take advantage of what happened last week with Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison and what they did to that Falcons defense. They carved them up to the tune of, like what you said, 172 yards. So, I mean, I'm not expecting a 21 carry, 111 yard performance, 2 touchdown performance out of Sanders. Would we love it? Absolutely. But I think this is a really good game for Sanders to prove he can do it outside. He can do it inside. And I think he will get probably 10 to 15 carries and he will put up 75, 80 yards and at least 1 touchdown. I think it's a really good team to face for Sanders to have that comeback game after kind of a lackluster game last week, in my opinion. Obviously, he flashed some good things and he had that touchdown call back, but this is a game where you're not just going to flash it, you're going to show it. And I think this is Sanders' game to do it. Either side of the ball, I'm going to go Mohamed Sanu based on that stat that I dropped about being second worst defensive team against the slot last year, behind only the New York Jets. I think Mohamed Sanu could have a really big game when our secondary is focused on Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones. Sanu will probably wreak some havoc in the slot to the tune of, I think he'll get targeted almost 10 times, and I'm thinking 6-7 receptions, close to 100 yards, maybe a touchdown.
Okay, so 2 offensive players. I'll go to the defensive side of the ball just to be different. Fletcher Cox has to dominate for the Eagles. It is very imperative for him. Again, we talked about if you get pressure in the face of Matt Ryan, he's prone to making mistakes. So he's got to find a way to do it. And for the Falcons, I'm going to go with Vic Beasley. I think they need to find a way to get pressure on Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz was sacked once last week, but it wasn't even like a sack. It was a 0-yard loss. The Eagles' offensive line was damn near perfect last week until Vitae came in the game. But he's got to find a way. Him and Deion Jones, they have to find a way to get to the quarterback. And the Eagles' offense, we saw time after time. Jason Peters played every snap last week. Did you expect that? Because I sure as hell didn't. But he played every snap and didn't get a penalty called. He's always good for at least 1 false start penalty a game and had nothing. Lane Johnson was dominant. Brandon Brooks, no holds barred this week. He has no holdbacks. He can play every snap this week. I expect him to dominate. Jason Kelce doing what he does at the center position as one of the best centers. They have to find a way to contain this defensive front. It's a small defensive front, but it's a fast defensive front for the Falcons. So it's going to be imperative for Vic Beasley, Deion Jones to find a way to put pressure on on Carson Wentz. And it's going to be very imperative for Fletcher Cox to bully, the backup right guard that's going to be in front of him and get in the face of Matt Ryan.
Oh, you saw what Johnson did to Kerrigan. So, I mean, if
yes.
he did that, and then I don't think speed's a factor. As soon as you're in his grasps, you better be damn fast cutting that corner and trying to get by him, or else you're going to end up on the ground and you ain't getting up. So,
once he gets his hands on you, you ain't going nowhere.
Exactly. Like I said, I guess I picked offensive players because I think it's going to be a really offensive heavy game.
Oh, I agree.
Mean, I think there will be pressure on both quarterbacks. We'll see it, but I think that, we saw Carson Wentz last week. He loves to move out of that pocket. He loves when pressure comes. He thrives on pressure coming. And Matt Ryan, he'll just move the ball a lot quicker if he has to, and he'll hit his targets in the slot, or he'll, like we said, hit those hook routes or slant routes at 8 or 9 yards because our secondary is playing too far off.
Oh man, that's it. They're actually a big key too. They got to find a way. Jim Schwartz has to find a way to get the corners to be more physical, to play up. They need to figure out a way to do that, because if you're not, these receivers will abuse you all day. All right. So we talked a lot about the Falcons. We talked a lot about the Eagles. Before we get to the pick segment, I want your biggest overreaction from NFL Week 1. It can be anything. Doesn't have to involve the Eagles. Tell me it. We'll discuss.
I'm going with Lamar Jackson. I gotta go with Lamar Jackson because Jackson. I love Lamar Jackson. Don't get me wrong. And I mean, from a fantasy perspective, you love to see a game like that. But everyone who's sitting out there and calling him like the one of the top quarterbacks in the league, and oh my God, he's completely changed. Calm down. I don't think this week or last week are going to be a good way of really perceiving what Lamar Jackson actually is and if he has a grasp and handle on this offense, because the Dolphins are horrible. They are just putrid, and the Cardinals are still working on rebuilding and getting things together. So I don't think these two games are a good showing of what Lamar Jackson actually is. We got to see him up against a Vikings or Bills or the Steelers, but not the Steelers who played on Sunday night. I think there's still, it's an overreaction. I guess this is from a fantasy perspective, my overreaction, because Lamar Jackson, I don't know if he's QB1, by maybe a low-end QB1, high-end QB2. And I think these first two games people are just going to overreact to, which if you have Lamar Jackson on your team and the right offers there, well, you might be able to sell high on him, very high on him.
You have him, and you didn't play him.
I do have him, and I won't move him because my other quarterback's Cam Newton, who doesn't seem to be Cam Newton anymore.
Oh, my Lord. I can't believe, okay, a side note, I can't believe on 4th and 1 in that game Thursday night that they did the fake Philly special instead of just doing a QB sneak. They had half a yard at the 1.5 yard line. What kind of play call was that by Ron Rivera? It made zero sense to me. And Norv Turner. Isn't Norv Turner their offensive coordinator? That made zero sense.
Yeah, no, it made absolutely no sense. I mean, they continue to claim that Cam Newton's healthy, but I'm not sold. I don't think he is. I'm not sold. I think there's something up with that shoulder, and I think it's reminiscent of Andrew Luck. I think this could be a shoulder thing that lingers and lingers on and hurts his career.
It really well could, and, I don't see him as being one that would retire, but yeah, he just doesn't. He needs to find a way to get healthy. He wasn't really able to do anything much in camp. My overreaction is the Dolphins are going 0-16. Yes, they have games against Washington and the Giants later on this year, but that team is atrocious. And a bunch of players just won out. They don't want to play there anymore. Minkah Fitzpatrick, granted, well, there's differing reports, but he was granted permission to seek a trade. Howie, I hope you make a call, by the way. But, that team is so bad. Yes, they don't have the play. They traded their best offensive lineman. They traded their best receiver. They have Kenyon Drake, who's pretty good, but not like a stud type of running back. They're bulking up on picks. They got a bunch of picks from the Texans in that trade for Tunsil and Stills. Going to get more picks if they trade Fitzpatrick and anybody else that wants to go. But I feel bad for their players. Like, the players, obviously, they're not tanking. They're trying. But the front office, it's obvious that they want to tank for whether it's Tua, whether it's Herbert. Doesn't matter, but I feel bad for that team.
No, absolutely. I mean, I tweeted about it earlier. I don't think they understand what a rebuild is. Keeping a guy like Laramie Tunsil and keeping a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick should be top priority. Those are the young guys that you want to build a team around, but they literally want to start from ground zero, scratch.
Yeah.
With this team, and I don't know if that's a proper rebuild. This is a full this isn't even a rebuilding. This is a building of a brand new team. And I mean, I don't think that, 0-16 is realistic. I think they can squeeze at least a win or two out. But I mean, if anything showed from that Ravens game, if you're a Dolphins fan, which my brother is, it's going to be a long season.
Like, I wonder how much the Eagles play in Miami on December 1st, which is Thanksgiving weekend. And my birthday's the next day, so I've been thinking about treating myself to tickets to go. Like, I probably can get tickets. Granted, there's going to be a crap ton of Eagles fans down there. Probably can get tickets for cheap. Like, the most expensive thing is going to be the flight down to Miami and a hotel probably. But, like, it's going to be a long year for the Dolphins. You have to play in the AFC East, so you get the Patriots twice. You got to play the Eagles. You get the Cowboys next week. They're saving hope that, is the Giants, but the Giants actually have a stud at running back. So he could go off for like 300 yards if he wanted to, probably. But it wouldn't shock me though if over the next couple of weeks the Dolphins players go, you know what, we're going to do this in spite. You remember the movie Major League when the owner kept selling off everybody and then, wanted the team to lose so she could relocate them. The Dolphins could be like, all right, well, in spite, we're going to come out here and play and we're going to find a way to win games and not get the number one overall pick. Don't know if it's going to happen, but it wouldn't surprise me because obviously NFL players are, they want to win games. They don't like losing.
Oh, exactly. They definitely don't like to lose, and it shows in the frustration of people wanting to get out that they really don't want this. Yeah. And nobody does. I mean, it's a tough thing to play through. Let's just think of, I know you hate them, but the 76ers and the process. Like, this is just, it's painful. It's long. And you look at their laundry list of players who were part of the process. It's hard on players. It's a mental game just as much as the actual physical game that's taking place on the field.
Yeah, and Akeem Spence had talked about it this week. The Eagles picked him up after the Malik Jackson injury, and Spence spent the training camp with the Dolphins, and he's like, it's a totally different mentality in Philly than it is in Miami. Like, he says he feels really bad for his former teammates because it's a losing culture. And being in this locker room and being in this winning culture, you just change the attitude of the player.
Oh, exactly. Like I said, the mental game that it is and the mental toll that it takes, you don't want to play after a while. And well, just it goes to show it's just the way all these players want out and going to their agents and saying, get me out, get me out.
All right. So I like that staple. We're going to continue to bring that back every week. We'll take our biggest overreaction from the previous week and discuss that. Now we're going to move to the vaunted picks segment. We both went 3-0 last week, so we're tied at the top with 6 points. We both picked the Eagles to defeat the Redskins. My lock was Baltimore over Miami. That was easy. And my upset was San Francisco over Tampa Bay. Your lock were the Chargers over the Colts, and the Chargers got help from Adam Vinatieri missing field goals, and the Bills over the Jets. Good call there. They were down 16-0 because their kicker missed it, and then they went and scored 17 unanswered points. I saw the game-winning touchdown. It was unbelievable. So good call there by you, Connor. All right, so give us your first pick.
I'm not going Dolphins. I hate using the Dolphins, so I'm going to wait till later on to use it. It's a good one to use, and if I was a betting man, I would definitely be betting against that 19-point line, and I still might. I still might actually bet against that, but I'm going with the Cleveland Browns over the New York Jets because
That's your lock,
Sam
right?
that's my lock because of the whole Sam Darnold mono situation, and we have Trevor Siemian coming back out. Oh, I don't know how much that offense is going to actually be able to pull together with Le'Veon Bell, with Robbie Anderson, with whoever you name them. I think they're going to struggle, and the Cleveland Browns are going to come back with a ferocity from what happened last week.
Yeah, that was an ugly game. No, I don't think the Browns were a lot of people's sexy pick to make the Super Bowl, so that definitely was unexpected, especially against the Titans team, which they are a very up and down team. My lock, I am taking the Patriots plus 19, whatever it is, 19.5 points over the Dolphins.
You just gonna pick everyone who faces the Dolphins?
No, but I'm going with the spread though. So if the Dolphins keep it within 19, I lose. I'm going with this because of that Miami miracle last year, and the Patriots don't tend to play well in Miami, so they want to come out and prove that look, last year's game was a fluke, which that was a crazy ending. And it's Antonio Brown, most likely Antonio Brown's first game, and I expect him to kind of go off, get a touchdown or two. So I'm very intrigued. If the Dolphins score quickly first, then it'll definitely be interesting. But I think the Patriots are going to be able to cover. I think the Patriots put up over 40 points, and I don't see how the Dolphins put up more than 2 touchdowns, 17 points at the most.
That's fair. I like that.
Who's your next pick?
So what are we going on this one?
Lock, and then we'll do the Eagles.
Well, we did this. The first one was the lock, right?
Oh yeah. So upset. Sorry, upset.
Oh, an upset. Oh goodness.
I'll go first, so you can.
Yeah, you go ahead.
I'm taking the Saints plus 3 over the Rams. It's in LA, and we know what happened in the NFC Championship game last year. Obviously, it's a different location, but the Saints they didn't look good early on in the game against the Texans on Monday Night Football, but they are going to be on a mission this week to prove that last year's NFC Championship game was a fluke. And I think the Saints are going to win this game and prove that Jared Goff is, not that good. I still don't think Jared Goff is good. Just saying. That's just me.
I'm going with the Seahawks minus 3.5 against Pittsburgh. That's going to be my upset. I'm taking Seahawks.
Wait, who's favored? Pittsburgh?
Pittsburgh's favored by 3.5.
So Seattle plus 3.5 over the Steelers. Okay. So you like Seattle coming all the way across the country to come away with that win?
Against the Steelers team that we saw last week? Yeah.
That was an ugly game.
The Seahawks have a decent defense, so I think they have. I mean, they're not the same defense that they've been, but I definitely think that they can make things happen there.
Okay, so I'm going with the Saints over the Rams, and you're going with the Seattle Seahawks over the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, for the big game, the Sunday night matchup, which Sunday Night Football, I think, is the premier game, I think, on TV now. It's not Monday Night Football anymore. It's not Thursday Night Football. Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth, I think, do a great job, even though I can't stand Collinsworth sometimes. So Eagles, Falcons, break it down. Who you got?
I'm going Eagles. It's only the line's only 2 points for the Eagles, so it's basically a pick'em game. Yeah. So I'm going with the Philadelphia Eagles. I think we can take the Falcons this week. I mean, I think the Falcons are going to come out a better team than they were last week. But I still think that we get enough points that we're going to outscore them in this offensive battle.
Yeah, I think the Eagles-Falcons has a chance to be the best game of the weekend. Two very similar teams, two teams that are really close, and a team in Atlanta that hates the Eagles. Atlanta has won 5 of the last 7 games in Atlanta. I still remember back in 2005 when Jeremiah Trotter got thrown out of the game because Ike Reese started some stuff when he went from the Eagles in 2004 to the Falcons in 2005. And Trotter got thrown out of a game that the Eagles would have won if Trotter didn't get thrown out. I remember Michael Vick returning to Atlanta with the Eagles. He got hurt in that game, and the Eagles were winning at the time, and then their backup had to come in, and things went downhill. So I have faith in the Eagles. The one thing the Eagles have to do though, they have to start fast. They can't, if they get down 17-0, they're not going to come back against this team. That's I think imperative for the Eagles to do. Find a way to get off to a quick start. If you jump out to a 7-0, 10-0 lead on Atlanta, I think Atlanta lays down. But I do think it's going to be an ultra competitive game. I think it's going to be the best game of the weekend, and I have the Philadelphia Eagles improving to 2-0 heading to week 3 as they stay tied in first place in the division, because I don't think Dallas is going to lose to Washington. I would obviously love to see it, but I don't think it's going to happen. So shouldn't happen. That's true. But it's in Washington. It's Washington's home opener, so you never know. But yeah, it's going to be a close game. It could come down to Carson Wentz needing to have a drive at the end to get into field goal range for Elliott. But it's going to be a very close game. But the Philadelphia Eagles are going to come away with the victory.
Perfect. So, makes sense to me. I like the sounds of that.
Yes, it's going to be. Obviously, the Eagles aren't going 16-0, but they're going to lose sometime. But I just don't.
Eventually, we're going to have to pick against them.
I don't think the Falcons are a better team. It just comes down to that. It's pretty much what it comes down to. The Eagles are just a better team than.
I think the Falcons are just middle of the pack, and the Eagles are a playoff team. At this point, I'd call them a perennial playoff team. So I just think the Falcons are just middle of the pack, mediocre, and they're probably going to end up. I think I have them going. I think I got them 10-6, 10-6 or 9-7, and squeezing into the last playoff spot. But they're just that team who's always just squeezing in or just missing.
Yeah, and it's kind of a shame for them because they have such a talented roster. I just don't think they're. This is gonna, if they don't make the playoffs this year, Dan Quinn's gone. He's most likely gone. So it's definitely gonna. This is a key game for them because they cannot drop to 0-2, especially with the Saints in their division. And this is a very, very tough NFC. Before we finish things off, this segment was brought to you by HG Coal Fired Pizza, with local stores in Warrington and Chesterbrook, PA. Stop in for the finest coal-fired pizza in town. You can visit www.hgcoalfiredpizza.com or give them a call at 215-343-4550. That was fun. You can reach us at the ANY Podcast, Twitter at ANY Podcast. You can reach Connor at Connor10, that's Connor TEN, or me at LJ Harrell 54, that's LJ Harrell, HARRELL 54. We'll be back next week. Connor won't be here for the review of Eagles Falcons. That's going to be me, Shane, and Rob most likely. But we'll be back late next week for a preview of the Eagles Detroit Lions matchup as the Eagles host the Lions in week 3 of the NFL season. For Connor, I'm LJ. Go ahead, Connor, let us out.
Fly, Eagles, fly.
Thank you for listening to the Kelly Green Hour here on the Always Next Year podcast.
Feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and so jiggle my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still had me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.